Welcome to the East Side of Bend Duplex, Triplex, Fourplex Market Report for August of 2026. This is where I dig in and create the only report of its kind in Central Oregon, where I look at only the stats on duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes so that you know what's going on in the market and you can use that information to help make decisions for your own portfolio. Let's take a look at what is happening in the market right now. We're going to compare it to what was happening back in May, about 3 months ago, and we'll compare it to how things looked almost exactly a year ago in August of last year. So currently, there are 8 properties in the 2 to 4 plex category that are currently active, and only one new one in the last 30 days. So, what that means compared to the last times we look at this is there were 6 previously in May and one new one in those 30 days. So, those numbers aren't terribly different, but a little bit of growth. A year ago, there were 11 and there had been 3, so a little bit more activity at that time. But again, on the grand scale of things, not a huge discrepancy between the last couple times we looked at this and now. Let's take a look at the pricing around these properties. The current average price of these properties is $821,000. But of course, that needs a little bit of context to understand because that could be a fourplex, it could be a duplex, and it could be a huge fourplex, it could be a small duplex. And so we need to look at the average number of units that's comprising this 821,000, the size of it. We can look at a price per square foot, and we can look at a price per unit. So the average square feet here is 2595, which gives us a price per unit of 330,000 and a price per square foot of 362,000. Excuse me, $362 per square foot. Let's look back at previous. If we're at $330,000 per unit right now, in May we're at 361. So May was a little bit bigger, but again, without a tremendously huge data set, these numbers can fluctuate. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not terribly different. And a year ago, the price per square foot was almost exactly the same. Excuse me, not price per square foot. The price per unit was almost exactly the same as it is now. On a price per square foot basis, though, we are at a higher point now of $362 a square foot, whereas in May it was 309, and then a year ago it was 320. So a year ago, while our price per unit was almost the exact same as it is now, the price per square foot a year ago was quite a bit less. Our days on market right now are 65, which to me feels like a very reasonable number. I'm anything south of, 3 digits right now is feeling like a pretty good thing to me. In May, it was 83 days, and a year ago, it was 110 days. So it's interesting to see that a year ago, even though the prices per square foot were better, things were taking longer to go pending at 110 days versus 65. More than it's like a month and a half or so difference. Currently, in terms of pending properties, 2 properties are pending, whereas in the past couple times we're looking at and comparing to, the number was 4. As long as there is pending product, I think that that's a good thing. I'm not going to obsess too much over exactly what that number is, but I want to see things moving through the system. And that brings us to looking at closed transactions, and we'll circle back to expired, withdrawn, or canceled. In the last 6 months, 180 days, we've seen 13 properties in this category of duplex, triplex, fourplex close. So we have 8 that are active right now, 2 pending, and 13 that closed in the last 6 months. I'm really glad to see 13. That's a little bit more than in May and quite a bit more than last year at this time. The average price there is $710,000. Price per unit, or excuse me, number of units there is 2.62. But let's have a look here at the average price per unit. So $289,000 is what's getting the job done in terms of the closed number. So if we compare that to the average price per unit of what's being asked right now, okay, well, we're asking 330 and what's actually working is 289. So a difference of 40 grand per unit is, pretty significant overall. So These prices up here, by comparison, that are active might still be a little high compared to what has been closing. What has closed has also been at $320 a square foot, whereas right now we're asking $362 a square foot. So 40 some dollars, $42 a square foot there shows that the market is feeling like the current active ones are still a little bit overpriced. The average days on market that got these deals done was 82. I guess it's encouraging then that the average ones right now they're active are only at 65 days rather than 82. But I do hope that these sellers kind of get the message and are willing to make some price adjustments to get a little bit closer to what has been working in the last 6 months, which is 320 bucks a square foot and 289 a door. Let's go back and look at the price per unit and price per square foot as it relates to the last intervals that we're looking at here. In May, that price per unit was basically $313,000. So 23,000 or so more than it is now, but the price per square foot was a little bit less of 310. And a year ago, it was 313, 314 that was getting the job done, and 290, 291 that was getting the job done. So again, compared to where we are right now, 310 was doing the job, 291 was doing the job, but here we are asking currently 362 per square foot, which is still probably a little bit high. Then last but not least, we like to look at the expired, withdrawn, and canceled listings. These are basically properties that came off the market without the success of having achieved a sale. So somebody said, I don't want to list this anymore. Our listing agreement has expired. I don't want to renew it with my agent. And how many of those have happened in the last 6 months? Well, I'm going to say only three because I use the word only because in the past it was eight and then it was 10. And so I'm really glad to see that this number isn't too high because it's really easy for someone to list a property for whatever they want and then just treat it as a fishing expedition to see if they can get somebody to bite. And then when they don't, then they just take it off the market. And it's not a really realistic perspective or depiction of what's happening on the market. So I like to see that this is a very reasonable number at only three. So that's what's happening on an average sort of aggregated basis in the market of duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes on the east side of Bend, Oregon here. I would love to speak with you about your unique property, and we can extrapolate some of these statistics and look at them as they relate to your property. We'll look at your property as a unique property and see how it looks. So maybe you have a property you have been thinking about selling. Maybe you have a property you're thinking about buying. I would love to speak with you about that. So you can reach me anytime via phone or text at 503 869 7303. I do live here in Bend, despite that being a 503 number. And you can send me an email or check out my website, Jeff at oregonplex.com, and send me a message anytime. And I look very forward to speaking with you about your unique situation. Thanks so much for checking out the market report. I'll see you in the next one.